Hello, welcome to the self learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we are going to start Unit 15 Classical Liberalism with topic Critical Evaluation. The political philosophy of liberalism has been a subject of criticism at the hands of its advocates as well as its opponents, by the former on account of their polemical interpretation and by the latter on account of their indictment of the premises of individualism. The curious things about the philosophy of liberalism is that it has been denounced, rejected, revised, and defended, and by leading writers, for example, Lasky, who criticized the values of the bourgeois class and yet laid emphasis on the virtues of freedom and tolerance. Likewise, Michel Oakeshott commented that a philosophy of crude and uncritical individualism is, in fact, inconsistent with social democracy. Some important points of criticism of classical liberalism are as follows. The first one is anomalous ideology. Both as an doctrine and as a movement, liberalism as an amorphous ideology. Liberalism is commonly used by everyone who talk in public for every divergent and contradictory purpose. As Baltimore writes, one can remain liberal and be for, and the other remain liberal and be against a vast range of contradictory political propositions. The businessmen and the labor leaders, the general and the soldier, and the subsidized farmer and the watchman all speak in terms of liberalism, defending their interests and making their demands. Similarly, Bullock and Shaw write that no student of modern political philosophy would reasonably deny the name of liberal to any of the men represented in this connection. Yet each of them, Fox and Bentham, Richard Coburn and Lloyd Rosen, John Russell, Macaulay and Acton, Herbert Spencer and T. H. Green, Gladstone and Lloyd George, Mill and Canning held views wildly different in some respect from those of others. And these differences are differences not only of policies and programs, those are more easily explained, but also of principle, for example, of the role of the state and vexed question of laissez-faire. This means that as a public policy, liberalism is without a coherent policy, that its goals have been made so formal and abstract as to provide no clear moral standard, that in its terms genuine conflict of interest, classes, parties, and ideas can no longer be stated clearly. Used virtually by all, it lacks political, moral, and intellectual clarity. This very lack of clarity is exploited by all interests. It calls it indecision and open mindedness its absence of moral criteria as tolerance and formality for political irrelevance of criteria as broadly speaking. Now, the next point of criticism is wrong view of man and society. The liberal view of man and society has also been criticized. Although the liberal view of human nature has changed in the 20th century, nevertheless, it considers man as egoistic, lonely, separate from the society, possessive, and concerned with the fulfillment of his selfish interests. Consequently, the society was also seen as an aggregate of individuals, an artificial institution with no organic unity in its own, and the function of politics being the conversion of individual and group conflict into cooperation, harmony, and unity. In other words, society is no more than a jungle where animals roam in the grab of man. The socialist ideology completely rejected this notion of man and society. It argued that the man is dependent upon others not only for material needs but also for cultural and spiritual needs. Socialism viewed man as a social cooperative being and held the view that the nature of man cannot be studied apart from the society in which he lives. For example, Owen called it unethical, Bax termed it unnatural, Marx called it animal, like Mao called it poison, Maurice called it hell. Liberalism was no convincing view of the structure of society as a whole, other than the now vague notion of it as some kind of a big balance in which all social classes work for the common good. It has no firm sense of history of all times, nor of our generation's place within that history. The next criticism is philosophy of the capitalist class. Notwithstanding the highly flexible character of the principles of liberalism, it cannot be denied that it remained the philosophy of the capitalist class and continues to retain its bourgeois character. Liberalism has been the firm ideology of one class inside one epoch, the urban entrepreneurial middle class, which later on became the industrial capitalist class. It has been the economic philosophy of capitalism, and its basic purpose has been the maintenance of socio political arrangements necessary for capitalist economic relations. Critics point out that its welfare measures have been incidental to its fundamental purpose of protecting and promoting the interests of the capitalist class. According to Lasky, liberalism has always seen the poor as if they became poor because of their own mistakes. Classical liberalism always underplayed the fact that property also brings with it the power to rule over men and things, although it gives the right to property at a universal level. Yet, at practical level, the right is enjoyed only by a minority. The attitude of liberalism towards the poor, trade union activities, education, health, housing, social security is witness to the fact that in the ultimate analysis of all questions are related to profit. The whole economy is geared to the production for profit, for the owners of the means of production. However, regulated and controlled the economy may be by the state. As Lasky wrote, we must, if we are to be honest, admit that liberalism, for which Hobhouse battled so bravely, has suffered an eclipse as starting and as complete as that which attended the doctrine of the divine right of the kings after the revolution of 1688. The main reason for this was that liberalism became an instrument in the hands of the privileged class to retain its rights. The next point of criticism is negative concept of state. The criticism commonly passed on this kind of liberalism was that it neglected institutions and this historical growth, and that it worked with a falsely schematic conception of human nature and motives. It has no positive conception of social good, and that its egoistic individualism made it look with suspicion on the validity of any such conception. At the time when the total welfare of the community was becoming a principal object of concern, its weakness as a political philosophy was that its theory of government was almost wholly negative at the time when it was becoming the inevitable that the government should assume a larger responsibility for general welfare. That early political economy was full of contradictions was well explained by Karl Marx, who turned its argument to a quite different purpose. Richard has emphasized that the interests of the landlord were agnostic to that of both labor and capital. Karl Marx said that it was equally true that the interests of the capitalist were agnostic to that of the working class, because whatever share of the production went to profit was drawn from the wages of the workers. If the landlord could extract rent because he monopolized land, the capitalist in an industrialized economy monopolized the means of production, and his profit are a kind of surplus value or the economic rent. In fact, negative liberalism provided Marx with a ready picture of the exploitation of labor. Liberal economists thought that the system they were describing was natural, whereas Marx explained that it was rooted in history and ascribed the exploitation to the capitalist system. Similarly, Lasky also said later on the purpose of capitalism was to free the owners of the means of production from all those constraints which hampered the complete economic exploitation. Its concepts of human nature, society, social harmony, economy, and the state began to challenged by the mid 19th century, as a result of which it changed to welfare liberalism. To criticize liberalism is not to belittle its historical importance and contribution. During the past 400 years, liberalism has given many humanistic and democratic ideas, and almost all the issues of modern Western philosophy has been connected with liberalism in one way or the other. It has been the mainstream of Western socio-economic and political philosophy. Liberalism has given progressive slogans like liberty, equality, fraternity, natural and inalienable rights of man, democracy, development of human personality, etc. And it has vigorously fought against the orthodoxies represented by monarchy, papacy, and the feudal socio-economic order. In the beginning, as the philosophy of the revolutionary bourgeois class, liberalism guided many revolutionary struggles against the feudal order. Its economic philosophy played an important role in the industrial development of the West. Its social philosophy helped in the establishment of an open market society. Its political philosophy paved the way for liberal democracy. Its ethical philosophy led to the triumph of individualism, and it promoted secularism in all walks of social life. Classical liberalism freed the individual from traditional authorities and the state, and maintained that the political power is the trust of people. However, during the later half of the 19th century, a number of contradictions began to emerge in the face of Marxist challenge, and gradually classical liberalism was replaced by welfare liberalism or positive liberalism. But we continue to need liberalism, though it may not be enough. The drift towards authoritarianism and the decay in civil liberties, the increase in police powers, and the curtailment of rights are developments underlying the fragility of liberal achievements, even in its traditional heartlands, and make a firm commitment to the best of liberal values and institutions all the more necessary. Now let us sum up the unit. Liberalism is the dominant ideology of the present day Western world. It was the product of the climate of opinion that merged in the context of Renaissance, Reformation, and Industrial Revolution in England and Europe. Classical liberalism has been enriched by a host of thinkers, prominent among whom are Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Adam Smith, Malthus, Richard Bentham, James Mill, Herbert Spencer, William Senior, and Thomas Paine. Classical liberalism had faith in the absolute value and worth and spiritual equality of the individual. It believed in the masterless individual, in the autonomy of the individual will and rationality and goodness of the individual. The individual must have freedom in all spheres political, social, cultural, economic, moral, intellectual, and spiritual, etc. Freedom meant absence of restraints or freedom from all such authorities which could act arbitrarily and capriciously. It believed in the inalienable rights of individual. It cherished the rights of life, liberty, and property as natural rights, nor at the mercy of either state or society. It supported free economy, free trade, contract exchange, and competition. It opposed state interference in the economy. It considered the state as an artificial institution. It is the creation of man and is based upon social contract. The relationship between the state and the individual is contractual, and if state violates the contract, revolution against the state is the duty of the individual. The state, in spite of being the creation of man, is necessarily an evil. Its role is purely negative, that is, to maintain law and order, protect the rights of the individual, and leave the individual free to pursue his own good in his own way. Here we want to wind up today's lecture, and we have come to the end of the unit. Thank you so much for your attention.